Gracias, gracias.
Это там Geshe Sonam. यार गंगा ताजी बेले
So Tashi Dele, greetings to everyone. Can everybody hear Geshe clearly?
Yes, what?
Oh.
Oh, yeah, I'm also Tantam, the Zachi was a very true Zachi, Chishu, military, so La Pargata, and it's Zachi, yes.
So now within the 6 types of beings that dwell within samsara at the moment, in the palm of our hand, we have a rebirth that is the most powerful, the most superior. We have a precious human rebirth right in our hands.
Oh, that lead to say Shawachi, the
So now with our body and mind stable and relaxed, we want to be able to increase our own happiness and also to be able to contribute to the happiness of others.
Oh, that, Yabushina said, Narosun go to there, so give us on the magic, yes, the Selina,
And so as we proceed in our activities today, we do it with this understanding that just as we ourselves need happiness, so too do others require happiness and all good things. And we proceed with that mentality. So then, to kind of fulfill our wish for a more stable, relaxed mind, there's an advice from Lord Buddha, which is very useful. So these 4 things are known as the 4 dharmas of the Arya. So the first one is to dulokchikorwa. The first is to cultivate contentment with regard to one's clothing that one wears, thinking this is sufficient, this is good enough. This is the first of these dharmas of Aryas. And so this is called the dharma of the Aryas because this contentment, this simplicity helps us activate the potential for becoming an Arya, for becoming a superior being within our continuum. So if one is always sort of thinking, maybe this piece of clothing would be nicer, or this piece would be more beautiful, and always seeking better and better, right? There will never be any satisfaction or contentment. So the second one has to do with the things that one eats. So contentment with what one is eating is one of the dharmas of the Aryas. So this attitude of contentment, thinking, this food is good enough, this will sustain me, and not always seeking something more elaborate, more delicious, and so forth. So then the third one has to do with the place where one dwells. So contentment with one's simple dwelling is a dharma of the Aryas. So thinking that one's house or one's flat, wherever one dwells, thinking that this is good enough. I have what I need here, and not continuously striving, grasping at more and more.
어다데 법이 저거는 리서치 돼서 일단 나중에 제가 토한다고 다 돼서 was.
And so the first three of these four dharmas of the Aryas are not so difficult to cultivate because contentment regarding clothing, food, and one's dwelling, these are things that are actually not really difficult to understand.
어다 또 전부이나래 또 주주이나래 어다 돼서 일단 저거를 sombe 좋아지 매나 가디이나 리세셔와지요 말이 뭐요.
And actually, if whether one is wealthy or poor, if one is not able to cultivate contentment with these first three things, then one's body, one's mind will never be relaxed. One will never have the idea that this is enough.
어다 법이 리서로서 was 다 법이 리지와 될라 다 당한도 강갈 같이 뭐 뽕와도 뭐말라가 법이 리스.
So the fourth one is one who has become skilled in what is to be abandoned and what is to be habituated is a dharma of the Aryas.
어다 법이 리어 뽕와서리 당하로서다 다시 시키네바 시키세 간지지이나요다 법에 파자게 야지는 파자야.
So those things to be abandoned are those obstacles, those afflicted things that make the mind unhappy, that create problems, and those things to be taken up or to be familiarized with are those things that will lead our mind to be peaceful and stable. So recognizing what is to be abandoned and what we need to habituate ourselves to, this is a dharma of the Aryas. So actually, Geshe is explaining that these four dharmas of the Aryas, these come from the texts of the Vinaya, so the monastic discipline. But actually, regardless of our lifestyle, our station in life, and so forth, actually, these four pieces of advice are something that we can all apply according to our individual circumstances. So when we speak about the body and mind being relaxed and happy, when we speak about a temporary happiness, as well as establishing the causes for ultimate happiness or realization, then these four dharmas of Aryas are something that is very useful to us. So the first three, contentment with regards to clothing, food, and dwelling, are relatively easy to practice. And then the fourth one, becoming skilled in what is to be abandoned and what we need to habituate ourselves to. This is something in which we really need to train in stages in order to be successful. So when we say that the first three of these are easy, Geshe was saying it's not easy to practice kind of scrutinizingly according to those three types of contentment, but it is easy to develop a little bit of a feeling for their meaning and feeling for that contentment or simplicity. So this was one important piece of advice that Geshe wanted to share as a preliminary instruction. So as a beginning step, let us take a moment to place our bodies and our minds in a state of relaxed peace. So when we place our body in an upright position, then the channels are upright, the winds can flow well, and we come into a state of equilibrium.
在六十几趴，然后你要问到在短期刚刚中国去然后什么
Think in order for the wind, the prana, the energy to be able to move, flow freely through these channels, I will try to maintain an alert and upright posture.
六十嘛对了，对的，但中央一点没把它对中央一下，他下次嘛，他来的就小外头。
Think from the wind, the prana becoming clear and pure. In this way, in addition to the wind elements, also all of the other elements come into balance.
中央一下来了，对的，后面的做那都尴尬的，这个最上面把样都是。
Think from these four elements coming into balance, I can now focus and see how the feelings that are arising, how the thoughts or projections that are arising, these have no pinpointable or findable essence.
经过那个地方，什么这后面做那种简单的两种。
So think just as a gentle breeze clears away the clouds obscuring the sun, the clouds of my distracted thoughts are slowly cleared away.
对了，对的，你那都能找用嘛，采用那都能找啥不的，啥不的，是吧？这类传输的。
So think in this way from these winds, the energy in the body are pliant, and the mind is clear and lucid, different than
这给我感觉是个叫个人呢，他要做文章，他这个不对，可以把这个传输。
and think by tapping into this, the spaciousness of one's mind is understood. This will allow one to place one's mind effectively on the chosen object of meditation.
这个我就做嘛，我电波这个设备，啊，兄弟，我们这个要说是设要说，说把你就说他电波这个，他对我就是我自己的。
So think that this nature of the mind, based upon its purity and stability, try to use that to bring myself closer to the supreme expressions of kindness, minds of love, and compassion. And I will request blessings single pointedly in order to do that. 我 pause there. Yes, sorry. So we will begin with the prayers for teaching occasion. Did people keep their little booklets? I didn't see
Yes,
where
they
they all
have,
went. Okay, there's one other one.
I gave them a.
Okay, awesome. Sorry about that. I guess I was too relaxed from the meditation. So, Yeshula's plan for today is that instead of doing the Gandhana Gyama, the extensive Guru Yoga, just because it's quite long, what we'll do is we'll do the praise to Shakyamuni Buddha, then the mandala and the refuge, and then we'll recite the Mitsema, the short Mitsema prayer to Lama Tsongkhapa as our preliminary. So do the short mandala. Refuge in Bodhicitta.
Song ju je do so ju ju na na zhang ju ba de da ni ga su ji da gi chi xie ji be so na je zhou la ben ji song je de wa shuo song je do so ju ju na na zhang ju ba de da ni ga su ji da gi chi nian ji be so na je zhou la ben ji song je de wa shuo je don so ji je la la jiao zhi ba de da ni xiao zi ji da gi qi nian ji bi su na ji zhi la bei ji song jian de wa shuo 뭐야, 다 동네샤와 다 끊어 보니까 다 끊어서 돈 잡는 거 뭐야. 왔어. 왔다 간다 다. 는 변화 숨지가 치선도 대화집이 치선도 가지고 나 오프로 그렇게 많이 가지고 했어.
So when we speak about the activities at the beginning, we speak of the motivation, and there are different types of motivation that we could establish. For example, the motivations that establish one as a follower of the Buddha, and the motivations that establish one as a follower of the Mahayana.
다 누가 많이 봐지 이나요. 다 대단 간소를 보게 너는 니까를 이나 기고 자신 보지 그거 아이자 세 것이 더야 내가 것이 더야지 그거.
So even if one is a non-Buddhist, for example, in terms of this motivation, one could think that in order to be able to achieve a lasting and temporary happiness, I need to activate my mind's potential. I need to establish this vast mind, and one could proceed in that way.
다 대라요더니 소소도 고 기본다보다 그게 기와로 와서 대기본다고 제와도 정말 유조선으로 돈에 대대가 이나 이대 존재다 니까를 이나 기고 자치 못
So when one thinks about this wish for happiness, if one is wishing for that happiness only for oneself or one's immediate circle, the people close to us, then the love, the compassion, the kindness are developing has a very limited field, so it's only going to contribute to a temporary happiness. So if we strive as much as possible, it's definitely we'll definitely be able to bring forth a high quality kindness, a high quality love, and a high quality compassion. If we are one who seeks the bliss of liberation, if one wants that lasting happiness of liberation, then it is really essential for one to go for refuge to the three jewels of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. It is difficult to strive to that without refuge. So, this is not an empty sectarian reason that we state that refuge is absolutely essential to achieve the bliss of liberation, because if one thinks about it, in order to be able to be free completely, liberated from suffering, we have to understand its source. And out of the more manifest types of suffering that we can see, this is not so difficult. But underlying them all is this all-pervasive or compounded suffering. And this all-pervasive or compounded suffering, the explanation can only be found in the teachings of the Buddha. And this is why we need to go for refuge to the three jewels. When we speak about the problems of samsara, they're often enumerated as these three types of suffering: the suffering of suffering, the suffering of change, and the all-pervasive or compounded suffering.
다 덤보대 가로서 하도 뭐뭐기 던로고 하고 요아래 다 그때 매와서야 그로서 그수잖아요. 뭐 지기도 왔어.
And to understand the first two of these, the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change, one doesn't even need a higher rebirth as a human being or a deva, a god being, to understand this. We see from their behavior, if we observe, that even animals are capable of understanding these first two types of suffering because they do actions to try to avoid them.
빼는데 린다고치다 진짜 도보지이나
Mhm.
바주 진된 걸 바로요나
Mhm.
근데 레르 판 보고면도 그 시시대 자기도 왔어.
Yeah.
그다 너칼 파산도 요바도 고하고 요라 왔어.
So we can see that animals have an understanding of the suffering of suffering and take steps to prevent it. For example, if we have a Bajukra. Yeah. So if we have a cow that is in an area that where it comes to like a precipice to a cliff, we can see that when the cow has that precipice or that cliff in its line of vision, it will naturally back up from the place of danger.
당 안쪽에 계시요 바주세한테 농가사 기하고 요 말했더니 이나요 농가 얘네들 셀 자기 요
So a cow might not have an idea of empty space, in other words, the chasm at the bottom of that cliff, but it has a conception or a feeling for what that would mean for itself.
다때 리라 워케 좀 보시오 그 등아 다 뭐야 던로고 거로버게 강에 줘야 레카시 신기요 아이사 그 거기 강에 줘바들 리라 워드레스.
So this is why we say that this first type of suffering, the suffering of suffering, is the coarsest of the three types of suffering, because it is something that even animals are able to recognize and also to take steps to try and avoid.
다 델리 칼레카와 때선지 등아 세다 때세 등아 티사보데레 티사보세나 뭐 진지데로 와서 리라보요 말했어.
And so then out of the three, we go to the next level of subtlety, which is the suffering of change. And it is not the most subtle of these three types of suffering. It has a middling level of subtlety.
거의 대화 감각되고 인해서는 된다고 지 언제 등아 쇼도 요아래 생각하랬어.
And so one thing that we can understand here is that any happiness or pleasant feeling that we experience within samsara, it is in the nature of the suffering of change, actually.
소짐 좀을 마페 그네를 검 자네 판요래 지내시네 돌아도 거 자네 단요래 뭐뭐 손에 대파매 와서 야래 다 뭐뭐요 아래.
So before the Buddha came into the world and propounded his teachings, there were practitioners of various spiritual disciplines who cultivated their own understandings of shamatha, concentration, and vipassana, special insight, and in this way tried to solve the problem of the suffering of change. So teachings for dealing with this type of suffering were already present.
소진 좀벌레 베베깔 소진 기게 돈벌을 지고 산 대비니 뭐 강가포. 되는 수코기 냐모고 주메 그 사스제 받 세토 자기 뭐뭐요 아래.
So for example, the first of these non-Buddhist teachers who the Buddha encountered, he was able to propose a path to be free from the gonda dökamgi dungedi,
거기 냐모 강가포.
Yoma pangwa.
다스 거기 때 주메 콜 다프게 세 도월라.
So he was able to propose a path to be free of the afflictions associated with the desire realm. He was able to propose a path for the for freedom from the afflictions of the form realm, and he was also able to propose a path for a freeing of the afflictions of the formless realm, except for the very peak of the formless realm, also known as the peak of existence.
다까 디딜을 쓰지 그게 대화대. 대화 요하쇼스네 타비 대화 코로스네 델었던 요마자는데 뭐뭐요 아래.
So it was said actually that practitioners of this system, seeing this peak of the formless realm, which is also the peak of samsara, seeing the bliss of concentration that beings experience there as the supreme form of happiness, they actually proposed that state as liberation and had paths for cultivating.
손지오 코로솔 때네 덤보 된다 오사를 바셨던로 델레리 다 대우 전에 아버지도 해야 되네 이나에 디시딩이네 되면 있다.
So the Buddha cultivated this, and he had a taste of this, and he saw that this is quite a high state of a happiness, but at the same time, it is not an end to suffering. So it's not really an actual solution ultimately.
어다 기계 되지 기계 되지 삐타보 기계 중보야 버려도 왔어. 어다 단단 좀 벌리는 데는 연례 체가지 야 말해. 시에도게.
And so the Buddha came with this to his teacher, and the teacher, being an honest person, said, it may be so, right? It may be so that this is not the ultimate solution to the problem, but this is the highest level that we're able to get to with the current teachings that are extant in the world.
어다 드니 손지기 전에 드니 로트가 와든 거지 말했어.
So then the Buddha actually, is at that point that he set off on his own studies and practice to try to discover something beyond that.
어당이 된다 가르치고 가서 조조한저 드리게 지시가 차반 드지 등한테 코인요다 조데레 이제데레 대매봐서야 다 매봐서 도선다 다 타방이네 지가래.
So what the most important thing to understand from these comments is really that out of the three types of suffering, it is the all-pervasive or compounded suffering which is the most important, because it is the all-pervasive suffering which is the basis for all of the other sufferings, and in fact also the basis for samsara or cyclic existence itself.
어다때 깨져서 총아지를 맞대발라 다 그런 돈도 도반다고 지사 다때 같이 버래.
And because we won't be able to come to understand that and how to abandon it without a complete reliance, it is for this reason that we need to rely on the complete three of the jewels of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And so then accordingly with that, we will then cultivate in our meditations first the generating of refuge, and then the bringing forth of bodhicitta, or the mind generation. And so then as a preliminary for that, we want to put ourselves in an upright physical posture, and this is done according to the 7-point posture of Vairochana, but Geshe already commented on that really extensively previously, so we won't get into details on that. So of course it is recommended in this text, the 7-point posture of Vairochana, and there are kind of very clear reasons for that. On the same hand, it's not an absolute, in the sense that if you attempt the 7-point posture of Vairochana and see that it doesn't work for you, and you experiment with different postures and see that one of those is better, then you would go with that. So we know that this 7-point posture of Vairochana goes back to the time of the Buddha. It is the posture of meditation that the Buddha recommended for his followers, and they all kind of tried to attempt this. And in fact, it is said that there was even a monkey who was kind of living near to where the monks dwelled, and seeing them sitting in this 7-point posture all the time, the monkey was also able to sit in the 7-point posture. And so that monkey, of course, in search of food or dwellings or whatever, he moved on from that place where the monks were dwelling, and he continued to sit in the 7-point posture of Vairochana, and he came across a group of followers of a non-Buddhist spiritual tradition, and they were using a different meditation posture, but the monkey, convinced that this one that he had seen the Buddhist monks doing was the best one, he kind of insisted on sitting near those cultivators and in the 7-point posture. So those non-Buddhist cultivators, they kind of observed the monkey, and they thought, we haven't actually been reaching these realizations that we've been seeking. So maybe this has to do partly with our lax posture. So maybe we should try to do our posture kind of a little bit like this monkey is doing. And then on that basis, actually, from adjusting their posture, it is said that many of those non-Buddhist spiritual practitioners, they actually came to greater understanding and realization as well. Yeah, so that was a story, a bit of a diversion, but I guess I thought it was a nice story, so we shared it. Balangda. Ale. So there was a foe destroyer, and I'm sorry, the Sanskrit name's not coming to me at the moment. A foe destroyer whose name was Balangda. Yeah, so he was called foe destroyer. Drachompa in Tibetan is foe destroyer Balangda. But Balandak had a problem in that he was trying to, like us, cultivate shine or shamatha, calm abiding, but he found that he wasn't really able to maintain sitting in the 7-point posture of Vairochana.
아니 손질을 쉐비지 전에 손지고 다 저럴 했는데 저럴 짜쳐도 발로기 짜쳐도 이자 당한주 노지자 되는 거자면 되스 많이 하는 거자
balangsan ako
baju
balang di korang giming ale ko seungma balang
세텔 고치지는 짜쳐도 받아나
ale. So the Buddha, so his name Balangdak, it seems to have one of the particles in there indicates cow. So the Buddha came to Balangdak and he said, actually, you have some sort of a cow affinity in your body. So you won't be able to sit in the 7-point posture. So you should take more like the posture of a resting cow. And it is said that he kind of lied on his side, a little bit like a cow, relaxing in the pasture. And he meditated that way, and he was actually able to achieve shamatha or calm abiding. And so at the very end of that lifetime, he achieved the state of a foe destroyer and came to be known as foe destroyer Balangda. Yeah. And so in the Mahamudra and also many other systems of meditation, one of the systems for settling the mind is known as the 9-point breathing. So think I will bring my mind and my body into a state of peace. And so then so what you do is you take your right hand and you block your, you take your left hand and you block your left nostril and breathe in. And then you alternate and block the right nostril and breathe out. So like that. So do that 3 times. Now take up your right hand and you block your right nostril, breathe in the left. Block your left, breathe out the right, and do that 3 times. Then relax both hands and breathe in and out through both in a relaxed way. Think the body and mind are now peaceful, they're now relaxed. And think having settled into this neutral, this equanimous nature of the mind, I will now use that to bring forth positive mental qualities. So So taking all beings as your object of reference, try to bring forth a feeling of love for them.
세계 유주 강연에 좋아하는 나라 롱게시기 sombeton 라소던데 이미지
And then think of their suffering and think how wonderful if they would be free from that suffering. I myself alone will work to free them from that suffering. So the mind of compassion and then of superior intention.
이체다 디질리자이 손지 누지다 나로스가 나세다 저도 버지서 이 sombeton 쇼니주세
And in order to really be able to free all of those beings from suffering as they wish, I must take this I, this self, and use that to actualize Buddhahood. Bring forth this wish of bodhicitta to achieve Buddhahood for the sake of others.
디좀 메와서야 telata 마세들 고수이 토야 올려가시야 토야다 가오승보치도 야보치 som보치
Du jiro.
Yeah.
So I will use my understanding and this human life that I have to achieve ultimate victory of defeating the four maras. I'm fortunate to be able to have this opportunity.
센지 첨보 가와 치위가 돈이다 로제 유주가 텐데 던지가 디좀 메와서야 다 가병원이로 som보치
So then with this younger Sundang,
센지 첨보 가와 침빙원이라 디젤 로제 유주가 텐데 다 디자 메와서야 가병원이로 som보치
so then think with this mind of effort infused with joy, I will dedicate myself to the liberation achieved from defeating these four maras or demons.
뭐연대가지 당연도 가로 뭉쳐서 와
So then that was a relatively extensive preliminary.
다 던지게 디질을 자기 손지지 공부 도와셔 봐라 다 다와 다도 좌자 첨보자 당간조 와서 tempo 그건데
So in order to be able to completely overcome those four maras and realize the state of complete and perfect Buddhahood, then we want to focus on this instruction of realizing Mahamudra.
다 디지 메와서야 디빌레 메와서야 가로 이나에 다 강에 강감 메와서야 될라 다 보게 좌자 첨보 니를 다도 다 뭐시야 다 자치주 되래
So through this Mahamudra, through coming to understand the ultimate mode of abiding, of the way things really are of all phenomena, then we will definitely be able to overcome the four maras, leading to the state of complete and perfect enlightenment.
다 드링한도 디세셔 뭐 다 이마고 갈래갈래 렐레텐데 이런 거서 왔어
So, we're doing an overview because we don't have so much time to cover this all today, but Geshe hopes, on a future occasion, maybe we can go into more depth.
다 디디 진짜가 있어
So we will cover briefly. Also call you Jurbu.
제 마이 tembi 주소 주 요아리 비시지도 저 이벤 같은 거
Call you Ale. Nibe Godi. Ale. So I think we are on about verse 17 or 18.
temba do shijuga ta page sete ta tembo chine sujo ya pochi ko yes.
So this verse is actually explaining how we need to use mindfulness and introspection in order to be able to tame the mind. So I'll read out the first part of the verse. The second part, so 17. Post the century of undistracted mindfulness and station alertness to be aware of any movement. Hold tightly to that clear and aware nature of mind and starkly behold it.
That's what karu lutsa.
Yeah.
Dirme rich sa dirme lon to go
Yeah, yeah.
rich sa ngo tela shinji de la jeji ti esra ta senji ngo sari ngo kazu ka je mo je so se cheji so de na wo chi.
So we talked a little bit about the clarity and awareness of the mind. And so we try to hold those. And then in verse 18, it says, any thought, anything that arises should be noted as that and just that. Alternatively, severing thoughts abruptly as a skillful sword fighter would. Is there a problem back there? Or is everything okay?
아니 템비가 리치 치고소노 모토네 다 고자는 야쇼를 세기야 대 말해 템비가 세때 템보지네 슈드는 버게 야고야레스.
So actually this verse is very important because it's countering the idea that mindfulness meditation is kind of just a thinking of nothing at all or kind of holding that space. In fact, the quality of mindfulness is like a guard. It is something that's aware.
예송아 노도 고도 공시와 대도 대니 니서샤 세레타 세텔 미빠치 니질 데베레라 당가도 레톰비칼라 레라고요 말로 노존로조 버게 시와도 게빠도 게자만도 되네 노도 뭐 용미와로 왔어.
So then verse 18 is explaining a little bit about as we try to hold that nature of the mind and starkly behold it as a beginner, that is going to be difficult, right? And we'll have distracting thoughts, right? Distracting projections that arise.
So we need
to station this guard a little bit sort of like a bodyguard or a security guard of this introspection that can kind of be aware of what's going on in the mind and when this distraction is arising. So the mind is likened in the analogy to a wild elephant, right? If an elephant has not been trained, we can't make it go in the direction we want, right? If it's wild, it will just kind of follow its own fleeting thoughts. But the trainer of the elephant, in order to kind of be able to teach the elephant to learn how to go into a specific direction, the trainer has two tools that he or she uses, a rope and a goad. So like that rope and that goad, if we want to have a mind that is relaxed yet stable, able to abide on the objects, we also need two tools. And these tools are the tools of mindfulness and introspection. In fact, with mindfulness and introspection, we'll be able to direct our mind to focus or hold on any object of meditation that we wish. And then what we'll find is that from utilizing those tools, our quality of concentration will improve and improve. In fact, Lama Tsongkhapa says in the Lamrim Chemu, the great treatise on the stages of the path, as well in other texts, that concentration, samadhi, is like the king of those tools that protect the mind.
그거요나 미빠 다른 걸로 잡아 이나 내 둬야 될 temba도 시진이 그거 잘했어.
So if we want a stable mind that is able to abide upon our object of focus, if we want to be successful in that, then we need to cultivate these tools of mindfulness and introspection.
자나 요매 리 온보죠. 리치몬노지나.
Mhm.
아고사라 리치몬노지 미빠 찐 걸로 잡아 이나
Yeah.
템보 내 둬게 돼요. temba도 시진이 그거 그랬어.
So what allows one's concentration to be stable and immovable like a mountain, like a powerful mountain, these are the factors of mindfulness and introspection.
다 가시 세트 게이쇼로 파동와 이나.
Mhm.
고셔와 이나 som바도 니지 게이쇼 간디질 대 잡아 이나요. 또나 게미빠 간디질 로에는 로토바지.
And on the basis of cultivating this mindfulness and concentration, then when we think about the various objects that we may want to focus on during our meditation, like love, compassion, and so forth, we'll have built up the tools within our mind to be able to hold any of those as an object of focus. So therefore, if for us as the beginners, like from the initial stages, then it is very important to have mindfulness and introspection as the two tools that underpin our efforts at developing samadhi, concentration. And so actually, normally at this particular juncture in the text, there would be a more extensive explanation of how to achieve shine or calm abiding. So if we approach this developing of shine or calm abiding according to authorized texts by beings such as Aryadeva, such as Maitreya, and so forth, we will have kind of a process for developing our concentration that is rooted in authentic sources, that has scripture behind it. And so then how do these beings explain the process of developing concentration? They explain it using the formulation of the 9 abidings. And then in order to develop those, they can join these 9 abidings with a set of 2. So the first set, with 2 sets. The first set is of 5 faults, and the second is of 8 antidotes. And so how is one able to go through those 9 stages of abiding and deal with the 5 faults and cultivate the 8 antidotes successfully? This happens with the assistance of what is given as the 6 powers.
This one,
and so then when we talk about these kind of 9 mental abidings, there are kind of 4 sets of engagement. Good and so jire. Oh yeah, sorry. 이세지. 하고서. Yep. 하고서. Yep. Sorry. And so these 9 sets are conjoined with 4 levels of mental engagement. So I'll just read those out. The first is forcible engagement. The second is interrupted engagement. The third is uninterrupted engagement, and the fourth is spontaneous engagement. And so when one is trying to achieve shamatha, calm abiding, one should have a familiarity with these. So we'll continue down in the text of Mahamudra, and then if there's more time, we'll come back to this discussion of calm abiding. Okay.
오야 단지성아
그래서 가도 단다. 젬바 마쇼.
어 점바마쇼 레지레 선지절라가 레지레 센진주바 대난다 아사
So we'll go to verse number 19. When after severing thoughts, your mind is stable, then without losing mindfulness, loosely relax. Tightly focus and loosely relax. That's the ground on which to place your mind.
어땅으로서 어디 검자비깔 다버게 야 고자비깔 다 총소 리깔 카와도 되니까 리가제 터터 비거용보 셀레 그래스
So sometimes when we're meditating, what we'll find is that there is discomfort and distraction in terms of the body, right? Kind of like we're all over the place in terms of the body. But in fact, we need a body that is undisturbed and stable. This is very important.
다 이나요 릴헬레 그거래 되네 잼바 다 해요 말인지 또때 거기서 가서 이나 보게 때문이야 그래스
But in order to achieve this stability, actually, the body needs to be relaxed. So the paradox is that the body needs to be relaxed, but the factor of mindfulness is not relaxed. It's very active.
럼바 돈비깔도 신화게 내봐도 야 말했더니 개빠가 코빠게 바치 용 추주래 돼요 생각했어
So then in kind of the first in sort of the first stages, 징화스나 디 간소 영화라 줘야 돼. 아니 급스나 르르 니고에샤. 징화스나 르르.
말을 신화선 다 보게 미바 니선마도 봐 미방거 대마도 봐
Yeah, silbo mebada.
Yeah.
And so in the beginning stages, then out of laxity and excitement, we can definitely fall into laxity. Tambo chingwa tetsache warebe.
말을 돈보 신화 쉬치와 말에 개빠도 미바르지 돼서 다 용기 와래 고 돈보 자기나
So in the beginning stages, so in the beginning stages, it's not laxity that is the main problem. Actually, what we'll find is that in the beginning stages, we are more prone to the fault of excitement and especially distraction.
세네 돈보도 냐니 바르지 깔에 얘는 거 신화 주도시라요 말에 고 단다 알레체 템보 때문에 아이자 개빠도 단에 미바르지 다 용기 와래
So actually, in the first two of these 9 abidings, there's not as much sort of talk of laxity because one has not actually been able to develop the ability to stay on the object for that long. But there is more of a discussion of how to deal with excitement or mental wandering.
다 신화세한테 생걸 미빠때 럼바 세네 선반다고 되네 깔에 되네 전에 신화 거 주고 할 수 있는
And it's actually from the third of these 9 abidings onward that we see more of a discussion of laxity as that becomes kind of a more relevant obstacle.
난저 신내가 돼야 될 따와 이나요 돈보리를 주기도 요 말했어 세네 돈보도 니비가는 이나
Yeah.
건조 질 선반이 전에 되네
Ale.
아고서
So Geshe is explaining, some of you may be familiar, I don't know if Dave has a picture of it, but you might be familiar of the illustration with the elephant walking up the path, illustrating the 9 mental abidings. And Geshe actually said this illustration, traditionally, it started from the level of the 3rd abiding onwards, and it didn't include an illustration of the first 2 abidings. And so the elephant actually wasn't there for the first 2 of the abidings, but the monkey, in some you will find that the monkey is. The first 2 are represented with just the monkey. Yes, yeah. So Geshe said there's many different illustrations online. So if something doesn't exactly match up, that may be why. So for the first and the second one it's kind of like really kind of broken, cut off one's ability to hold on to the object. But as one comes to the 3rd level of the 9 abidings, one is able to stay on the object longer. So then laxity becomes kind of a more relevant problem.
This one, what? This way, Chamba Masho Lechi, Shuji Jola, Seta Chamba Temborawa, Senior, Lechi, Senjin Juba, Tina, da, Sendo Tutani years and
So this mind bound by worldly entanglements is freed when relaxed. There is no doubt. As there is no doubt. As taught there, relax without distraction. Sorry, Jurche Chingpe Semni.
Jibi Senin Lena Toa, Teso.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was that Lil Hele, don't touch and button what the nation at Angaroso, Poginta, say second division of that while that's a mess and
So what this is really saying is that when we are able to relax the mind, then we're free of those entanglements, but we're also free of a kind of gonda. Nganso kare ne
do that's big tempo tempo to the but tempo chana
yeah.
then division to alata
So when the mind is relaxed and the body is also kind of placid, it is at that time that one can bring forth introspection, and then one can begin to loose those entanglements.
Ramba tombo ne ha ko ke ka chimbo chi la ngaro su go ja ya ti gen riwe te shejong le sono pon do ya res shejong
And so then another thing to understand is that as we cultivate this practice of calm abiding, there is a specific attainment that we're trying to achieve, which is known as pliancy. And pliancy is divided into two categories: physical pliancy and mental pliancy. And so when we speak about physical pliancy, we actually understand that on the subtle level, this is an achievement of a state where the winds, the pranas, are able to move freely through the body. And in this way, there is a profound feeling of kind of wellness, a kind of type of bliss on the level of the body. Gupa. So actually, it is said that when one reaches the completion, the 9th of these 9 abidings, then one has achieved these two types of pliancy, mental pliancy and physical pliancy. Because of this, the pranas, the winds, are able to move through the body extremely freely. And because of that, one actually experiences a level of bliss. That's why we talk about the bliss of mental pliancy and the bliss of physical pliancy. So tambo lu shejong
mara tombo se shejong
yep. So as we meditate, we can talk about kind of 4 things related to this pliancy. So the first thing that will arise as we become skilled in this meditation is mental pliancy.
And
so when we speak about mental pliancy, this is defined as the mind being able to abide on any virtuous object we choose in meditation without becoming exhausted or tired. And on the basis of the mind being able to abide single-pointedly upon that object without becoming exhausted, then there is a positive kind of pliancy in the body that arises. So then we have the physical pliancy that arises. Yeah. So then out of these 4, first we achieve the mental pliancy, then we achieve the physical pliancy. Tambo nipa den so So then once that physical pliancy is achieved, the winds of the prana can move through the body very freely. And from being able to move through the body very freely, there's a special kind of bliss that arises. And so then the third of these kind of 4 steps is actually the bliss of physical pliancy. The bliss of physical pliancy. So I want to go through these again because the order is maybe a bit counterintuitive. So number 1, mental pliancy. Number 2, physical pliancy. Number 3, bliss of physical pliancy.
그래서 다 릴프게 대시 만라와지 용요아이자 디제시네 다 셀파 대신에 여셔데 만라와지 되기요.
And then from number 3, from that bliss of physical pliancy arising, there's a happiness that arises, of course, in the mind, right? Kind of conjoined with that, and that is known as the bliss of mental pliancy. So we have to understand how this unfolds, because actually, as practitioners of calm abiding, of shamatha meditation, these 4 are really objects of attainment. In other words, things that we're trying to achieve. So the other thing to understand too is that if we have a comprehension of these 4 and sort of understand what we're working towards when we first approach the meditation, then right away, right, we'll have a slight feeling of bliss. Maybe not exactly what is described here, not an attainment, but we'll have a slight feeling for it. So we all want a body and mind that is more comfortable and more relaxed. And these days, even people in the scientific fields are saying that, meditation is one of the ways that we can work towards that. So because of the power of meditation, right, its transformative power, then even right from the beginning as a novice, we can begin to experience some benefit.
Yeah.
So Geshe is just going through those 4 again, just to clarify the order. So we have mental pliancy, number 1, number 2, physical pliancy, number 3, the bliss of physical pliancy, number 4, the bliss of mental pliancy. Yeah. So out of the 2 types of pliancy, it is the mental pliancy that is achieved first. And out of the 2 types of the bliss of pliancy, it is the bliss of physical pliancy that is achieved first. So that order is a bit counterintuitive. So Geshe is just explaining that's why he's going through it again, so that you can learn it correctly. So in some understandings, it is at the moment that the practitioner achieves the bliss of mental pliancy that shine, that calm abiding, has been considered to be achieved.
Lama
Tsongkhapa says it's not right at that moment where the bliss of mental pliancy arises, but it's relatively close to that. A few instants later, from that pliancy, there will be a profound sense of peace or relaxation. It is at that moment that calm abiding is achieved, according to Lama Tsongkhapa.
Me.
Uma loves him. So the example that's given to illustrate Tsongkhapa's perspective here is that if you have a person who you like very much and who you haven't seen in a long time, if you see that person at many years, if you spot them in the distance, immediately there's going to be kind of a feeling of happiness, maybe an excited feeling of happiness, but it's not going to be very relaxed or even. So it's almost because the joy or the bliss is a little bit too heightened that you don't have that factor of relaxation along with it. So that is a little bit similar to when the practitioner is first bringing forth that feeling of the bliss of mental pliancy. So it's a blissful feeling, but because it's kind of a little bit intense on the meter, there's not a factor of kind of peace or relaxation with it.
당게 빼빼는 뭐지 깨진이 반 주보 다 디세리워도 말와서 롱조 다 헬레지 차네 되네 전에 뺏겠잖니 뭐시래
But once you draw close to that person you haven't seen for a long time and begin a conversation, then that sort of heightened feeling of happiness, it subsides a little bit. And then you also have that factor of peace along with it. That's the illustration given for the moment when the calm abiding really arises.
다 전에 때르시는 자신이 디디레스
Yeah, so that's the moment when the actual calm
와야
abiding
다
is
못
set
잡서
to rest.
거기다
Loso.
노도 고도 공시와 디제荣耀 동송 차르서 대전 니체고 따바나 마저 동송 시계와 통화 년전디바시
So we are now on verse 21. When thoughts arise and you observe their nature, then when they naturally disappear and a pure vacuity dawns, likewise, when you examine the settled mind, you see an unobstructed, clear, and vivid vacuity. This is known as the merger of stillness and movement.
다 셀 야보 지님이 빠셀 따네 데비카라 다 노도 담을 레소나 총sol로 노도 코로 세데 데제 파자 노도 텔 따와이나 노도 데제 롬메바 야로요아레스
So one thing that we'll find actually is that as we practice meditation and try to focus on an object is that when we have a lot of namtok, so projecting or distracting thoughts arising, if we're kind of really with it, we can just observe the distracting thought, and merely through that observation, the distracting thought will begin to dissolve.
드네 요 셀 따와이나 세데 마저 동송 시계와 세데 동송 연발라
Simgi tongsu.
세코로 동바 연발라 노카던라와 연발라
Yeah.
강가 샤토바지 요아레스
And one can also cultivate an awareness here when these appearances arise, even when they're distractions. That is, it is the mind's emptiness, which is like the sky, which creates that space in which those distractions can arise. So one can think of that as well.
이나요 멜로노 샤와 노지 세코로를 가이 가르 이나 샤토바데 당한 중에서 그 요아레스
The other example that's given and that's important for us to recognize is the capacity of the mind, which is like a mirror. It is able to arise to dawn the appearance of any object of knowledge.
너도 어디서 와? 야, 다 좌시 너도 지시 좀 몽군 저와 니스바 시대 대인 오란 조바 지지 샤제는 페이페도 춘바이
22. Whatever thoughts may arise, do not stop them, but recognize their movement and place your attention upon their nature.
저다 지 반데 니드근도 와
Yeah,
당길
so that was explained already, kind of.
베더 노징아도 지지고 샤테 빼 먹어자는 시에사르 다 하고 그랬어.
And so as we come to verse 23, there's an example of the bird on the ship. And this is a very famous example that many of you will have heard. It's an important one.
저다 지네 페이 샤로노 쇼노 끈네 라요 템바 저르사
It's the same as in the example of the flight of a ship's captive bird. It's like a raven flies from a ship, circles in every direction, and lands there again.
다 자와 코로노기다. 저왔다 먹어.
So, yeah, the
속에 선바들와.
Sawa sorry, tits nagbodin so.
Yeah.
So Geshe says we don't have time to go through all the commentary, so we will try to go through the root parts of the text. So we are now jumping to, I believe, verse 37. Yeah, Gashar namtok what?
Huh?
Also kebu samin chumai.
chumai memeluma no kama no shimai kama na telejana shivu kotun division yota ma yata teje corner re division yota ni de mo.
So we go to the root text, which means we jump to verses 30 and 31. The protector himself, Arya Nagarjuna, says, an individual is not earth, is not water, is not fire, is not air, is not space, is not consciousness, nor is it all of them. When then, apart from these, is the individual? Just as an individual does not really exist because it is a composite of the six elements, in the same way, the individual elements do not really exist because they are composites.
당게 세 개자 무엇이 자송아 세고 거롱 니선비깔라 세 노카던라와 동소라고 지다 라바 제노와샤비깔 몸보지 텔 노네라 세게 닐루 타도 라송 So there's
a confusion that can arise here. We talked about the nature of the mind, its mode of emptiness being like the sky. And so there's an error that can happen here for the meditator when that kind of understanding of the emptiness of the mind as being like the sky is dawning. One might think, oh, this is really it. This is the realization of Mahamudra. But in fact, that is not the case.
다 디디 세 그쪽에 내서 지라바레마도 대도경이 내서 라면도 수고야레스.
And that's because at this level, right, one is still abiding in the relative, and one has not yet begun a focused sort of investigation on the ultimate nature.
세가 대도경이 내서 다른 고사 나이가 되는 대도경이 내서 라가는 다 게벌로 수한테 돈을 줘.
So if one wants to go sort of beyond those analogies and really be able to develop an understanding of the ultimate mode of abiding, the way things really are, of the I, of the self, of the mind, then one needs to rely on accurate instructions such as those of Arya Nagarjuna, and that's why Arya Nagarjuna is quoted in verses 30 and 31.
나로서고 다 그냥 리근 놀러서는 만들어와 가르쳐되어서는 사이코 메이코 륜기코 지 안에 지코 코지 너가 노시고 코 가르이나요.
So what this verse is saying is that if you try to look for the self of persons, if you try to look for that pinpointable, findable self, if you look in the elements of earth, water, fire, and wind, you will not be able to find it. Similarly, if you seek it in space or in consciousness, you will not be able to find it. Jason.
다 저도 초시샤와나
gyudang
초시샤와나 청와마소 제든 저 베레스다데.
So then we come to the next quote, which is at the bottom of verse 34. So-called continuums and collections, such as rosaries, armies, and the like, are false.
그런데와 어따 특별히 저세나 가서 치죠. 저러와.
Yeah.
어따 치죠라서 봐. 소세나 다 뭐뭐 줘봐.
Yeah.
아니 저와 전에 칭왕하고 그러와.
Yeah.
변화 초바세를 보겠다 마음이라고. So
this is talking about the lack of pinpointability or findability of those things that we consider continuums. So when we speak of the mind, right, we speak of of it as a continuum, right? It is a continuum of a consciousness that is momentary. We can't point at any one of those single instances and say that it is the mind.
This one, that Chinwasan Hakoga, Chingande, Hotokachi, Chingande, Sons of Juartan, Tatare, Jevahina, Satani.
When we speak of a collection, we can think of a rosary, right? Which is essentially a collection of beads, but we can't point at any of those individual beads and say that it is like any of these individual are the mala or the rosary.
What Kaze to the Tatanich Toach Lesona, Mandu, Ronjita Mandu, so much in Tingo Kaze, to the Tase de
So when we come to that understanding that there is nothing findable, there is nothing pinpointable here, there is nothing that I could say exists inherently, then that is the understanding we're trying to reach, and then we should rest on that. So verse number 37, when you're fully aware that whatever appears is conceptually apprehended, then the Dharma realm dawns independently of anything else. When awareness rests within this dawning and you settle in single-pointed meditative equipoise, ma.
So
it's saying really dwell in that mind that there is no findable, pinpointable thing, that there is nothing that is existing naturally of its own side.
Yeah.
So there's now in verse 38 a quote from Padampa Sangye: whirl the spear of awareness within emptiness. The view, O Dingripas, is unobstructed.
repeat ta kora mo buja shu.
So don't just experience emptiness as kind of a nebulous thing, but use the sphere of awareness. In other words, also understand the reasonings in order to make sure that that emptiness is qualified.
Wa ka zo la ba no ji che go dong ju go ni ge to ne ta che go ti ge se ni pa che wo to che ren do ya. Ju go ti ge se tem bo zo ya.
So as before we mentioned that both analytical and a placement meditation are important.
Se ni pa chen bo to chen bo.
The power, the capacity of the mind is developed through analytical meditation. And the single pointedness of the mind is developed through placement meditation.
Ni po che ke ta wa ke te na kan je ta ta je wa no te se.
Tongpengang
No te tu me ngon ro sai ka se.
ale.
Ni po che so ge so ro je ba.
Ngopo chikta.
Ta wa ke te na kan je de chi de no nga chi na. Ni po kan je ta wa ke te na kan je ta wa shi ji ge tu ni ko ya ba te na kan je tu ni.
So we are now coming to kind of just at verse 42, the Pakpalagi.
Yeah.
So it's a verse from Aryadeva. Geshe is not sure actually of how it's rendered in the Tibetan, if it's completely accurate, but we'll do our best. The English reads, the viewer of one entity is explained as the viewer of all. The emptiness of one is the emptiness of all.
Ta de wo la to so so zan da man ra yo res. Ane ta nga ro so nga
Dilakton la lepson tanda.
Ta de chu ma ja.
Okay.
Ane nga ro so ye ka re li na ta zo nga do nga I sen go nga zo ta che zo ga was. Te ta che zo ne la. Teng ta nga do nga I sen go lo tu ma ni ji to cha so na. Ri chi ge sen chi kang go lo chi de tian da. Chi kang go tu ma ni de to ro ge re la ki chi ya res.
So this is explaining when we come to the point of cultivating vipassana, special insight, at kind of a higher level. Then it is said that initially we try, the practitioner may try to have a cognition of the emptiness of that we call myself, the I, and that we call my mind. And in some commentators mention that once one has developed that realization of the emptiness of the I and that which we call my mind, then that understanding of emptiness, that realization of emptiness can be carried over to the emptiness of any object. And so that's what it means when the viewer of one entity is explained as the viewer of all. Indeed, but you know, these words need some qualification. They can't be taken at face value.
Yeah. So
the qualification is that once one has cognized the emptiness of that I, it's not like automatically any other thing that you look at, suddenly you cognize the emptiness of it. That's not what's being said here. But because you've cognized the emptiness of that I, of that self, then when you look at any other object, it will be much easier to cognize its emptiness without even a modicum of the effort that was required before. Yeah, because actually, if we understand how wisdom is developed, when we talk about the wisdom realizing emptiness, the wisdom realizing emptiness, the object of negation is going to be the same, and that can be applied to any phenomena that we look at. Therefore, it makes sense that once you've understood, cognize the emptiness of one object, it's relatively easy to cognize the emptiness of other objects. So if we understand that, then we can become a little bit happy, because if that makes us see that if we understand the emptiness of one phenomena, then sort of cultivating the understanding of the emptiness of the other phenomena is going to be a lot easier. So Geshe just kind of closing the text with, I guess, the colophon, or just before the colophon, the closing remarks. I, who am called Losong Chuki Geltsen, a renunciate who has heard many discourses, say, by my virtue, may all beings quickly become conquerors through this path, the door to peace, apart from which there is no second.
제로시는 노요 무슨 거
Yeah. Okay. So sorry. There is now a quote from Ensapa, and then there is a quote from the Lotus Sutra. So I'll read those. These are in the colophon. There is a path that is not the one I have just explained, the ultimate special instruction on Mahamudra. It is not present public knowledge in the land of the snows, so I could not commit to writing this point. Konda ko pela ne suchiki omarese gidwa dire. Tene di jendagdi Chironso chatsangwa sangye chagires. And so then the second verse in the colophon, which is from the Lotus Sutra, reads, this method was spontaneously devised for the sake of beings' realization of what it is to be realized by a Buddha's wisdom, but for the time you should not say to them you will be Buddhas. Why is that? The protector factors in time.
So
these verses are also helping us to understand that Mahamudra, this is actually rooted in the teaching of the Buddha, and from Buddha Shakyamuni, these teachings were carried from ear to mouth through a line of many realized masters. So then this concludes, Geshe said, his very short presentation of Losang Chökyi Gyaltsen's text on Mahamudra called Highway of the Conquerors. There is a longer text on Mahamudra by Panchen Losang Chökyi Gyaltsen known as Lamp So Bright, and perhaps there will be an occasion where that can be explained in the future. And so then Geshe just wants to, before we close, just very quickly go through the list of the 9 abidings. Nipa ne tambo ne nipa gi kya padan so jogi la so dene
tombo no ni tan jo pas.
And so kepa jogi jwa.
Mm-hmm.
So then when we speak about the 9 mental abidings, tambo dirwa sem jokpa.
Tombo se no tan jo pa ser se mi pa chingo ta so go ja yang go su ne ta azu ja gi ona.
The first of these 9 abidings is known as setting the mind. So this means that one is trying to fix the mind, trying to make the mind stick to the object. So when from the beginning one is just training with how to make the mind stick to the object, this is the first of these 9 called setting the mind. And what's the nyam or the experience that will often unfold for the practitioner with this first abiding of setting the mind? We talked about that a bit yesterday. It's that experience that there's more projection happening.
But
we explained that actually it's not the case that there is more, it's just that we are noticing it. So that initial feeling that there is so much happening is maybe not a bad thing. It's kind of okay when we talk about the first abiding. And when we speak of achieving the first of these 9 abidings of setting the mind, what is the measure of that? One is able to hold one's mind on the object single-pointedly for the count of 21 breaths. So the second is continuous setting. So continuous is used here because one is able to abide on the object of meditation for at least a little bit longer than with the previous. Kalekapo yimbahako. So the second one is the continuous setting. So one is able to hold on the object of meditation with a little bit more of a sense of continuity than before. And the sort of time measure for that is said to be equivalent to the beads in a rosary. So one is able to hold one's mind on the object for a count of 108. Yeah.
디세 림보디에 도메기 채와요 아래.
Yeah. So the first and the second of the 9 mental abidings are distinguished by how long the mind is kind of able to stay on the object. So it's distinguished by duration.
다 선발레 된 줘봐.
So the third of the 9 is called resetting.
레된 줘봐서는 간조 둘로 이거지 대소나. 아고서와 델을 nembo 잡으러와 리전다지.
So this third one is called resetting. Some call it fixing and setting. And the analogy here, it's kind of a patchy fixation. So just like when we have a hole in our clothes, we need to patch it.
선비깔 미바 뭐 쇼로 요할 때는 요요 칠레 레게 요하래.
So in this process of fixing and setting or resetting, what's happening is the practitioner is still losing track of their object of meditation, but is once again immediately able to place the attention back upon it. Sumbadi. Oh, yeah. So as one develops qualities of mindfulness and introspection to a little bit of a higher level, one can then come to the fourth of the 9 abidings, which is known as close setting. So at the point of close setting, one has developed the factor of mindfulness or recollection to a good level. So one is no longer having that experience of continuously losing track of the object. One is able to remember it. So the second and the So the third and the fourth of the 9 mental abidings, they are distinguished by whether one is still losing track of the object of meditation or not. Namying. And the second, sorry, so Geshe said he forgot to say that the difference between the second and the third, it's really based upon the how often the distractions are arising. And then between the third and the fourth, it's those are distinguished on the basis of the fourth having a better ability to continually abide on the object without losing track of it. Jipa ganso durwar chepa. Di droson. Jipa droson. Yeah. Ta ngapa jewar chepa. So now we come to the fifth of these 9 abidings, which is known as disciplining. And so the fourth close setting and the fifth disciplining, these are a kind of distinguished on the basis of whether rakpa dang chamorwa rakpa, they are based on the presence of a coarse level of mental excitement. So disciplining is referred to as disciplining. We can also think of it as subduing, because one is able to subdue coarser levels of distraction at the fifth as coarser levels of excitement at the fifth abiding. Trupa sana nampar shiwar chepa. So from the fifth disciplining, we come to the sixth of the 9 abidings, pacifying. What marks having continued from the disciplining to the sixth, the pacifying? On the level of a pacifying, one is able to pacify or to tame subtle mental excitement. Chupa nampar shiwar chepa. Dumpa sana se chik du chepa. No, jepa. Sorry. Chupa di shiwar chepa. Shiwar chepa. Yeah. Dumpa nampar shiwar chepa. Yeah. Chupa dumpa ni. Chupa dang dumpa ni nampar shiwar chepa dang. Oh, she get chamo. Se chik du chepa. She get nika ga chamo neva yo meg chepa. Chingu. Gaba chamo. Chupa ne dumpa drodu. So going from the 6th to the 7th mental abiding, from pacifying to thoroughly pacifying, this is determined by being able to thoroughly dispel the subtle levels of both laxity and excitement. So on the sixth level, one is not yet able to completely utilize the antidote necessary to totally dispel both a subtle laxity and excitement. But when one comes to the seventh level, then one is able to use that antidote to completely pacify subtle excitement and laxity.
Jepa.
Sechikdu chepa. So then when one comes to level 8 of the 9 abidings, which is called making pointed, which is called making single pointed, this is determined by Tramodin Sorwa, by any presence of subtle laxity or excitement. And when we come to the ninth one, Yampar Jokpa, setting in equipoise, this means that the practitioner, the meditator, no longer needs to bring forth any effort in order to abide single-pointedly on the object of meditation. It just happens effortlessly, without difficulty. And so when one has achieved that ninth one, then one can truly said to have attained a calm abiding. Semne tambo tupe top, sampe top,
Sombito, Jembito,
Shishingito, Sunjugito, then tripeto. So Geshe just wants to share with you before we close, I guess, the 6 powers. So the first is the power of study. Second, power of contemplation. Third, power of memory. We could also say mindfulness here. Fourth, power of vigilance. Fifth, power of perseverance. Sixth, power of familiarity. So then that's where we will end for today. So Geshe said that he really does have the intention to, in the future, take a few weekends to fully explain the Mahamudra based on Losang Chökyi Gyaltsen's text lamp so bright. So thank you then, with a mind of joy, let us briefly dedicate the merits. Jongjo semjo rinpoche maje banam chejo reche chewa nyamba meba yang gone gonda bewa resho tongni tawa rinpoche maje banam chejo reche chewa nyamba meba yang gone gonda bewa resho Jambe Bao Jita Jamba Tong Kundu Sambo Deyon Deshin De Dida Kungi Jesu Dalo Chir Gewa Dida Tamshi Rabdu Dusun Shebe Gyawa Tamshi Gi Wawa Gangla Judu Ngapa De Dagi Gewe Tsawa Dugu Shoji Rabdu Ngowa Through the power of the merits that myself and others have collected through engaging today in the Mahamudra practice, we dedicate these merits to all sentient beings being able to bring forth the mind of loving kindness. On the basis of these merits, may all the physical and mental sufferings of sentient beings be completely cleared away, and may they be able to abide in an authentic state of peace and happiness. And may the a sun of happiness of the teachings of the union of Sutra and Tantra shine upon all beings without exception. And may we all be able to achieve the end aims of our study and practice of the teachings. So we'll pause there. So yeah, we'll open the floor for questions if there are any.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead. I can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Genla, and thank you for everything. Amazing. So yesterday you were talking about that there's methods of sutra and tantra for developing shamatha, and I think you mentioned maybe you had to absorb the winds into the central channel for the Vajrayana methods.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if this method is considered sutra.
Sorry, Brian, I just want to make sure I got your question. So you're asking if dissolving the winds into the central channel, if that's considered Sutra Mahamudra or Tantra Mahamudra, right? Did I understand?
Or like the one we're talking about now, because we don't absorb the winds into the central channel when meditating on the ultimate nature of mind.
Right.
Is this considered a sutra version of developing shamatha?
Right. Okay, I think I got you. Yeah. Nganso perna do gi chaja chambo dang nga gi chaja chambo niga yere dua dene nganso tanda thaya di nganso di lung denso cha sangwa sa uma timya nyamlen chegi met sang kandislaw kare tartuki netsu tartuk droe tauchi chegi yotsang di do rebets not my impegi gimsen dires. Yeah, so that's correct. Because of that lack of the practice of dissolving the winds into the central channel, so that's what I said to Geshe, this lack of the practice of dissolving the winds into the central channel, but trying to realize the Mahamudra, the mode of abiding of phenomena, is it because it lacks that dissolution of the winds into the central channel that it's considered Sutra Mahamudra? And he said yes. But
Okay.
if that wasn't what you were asking, Brian, feel free to follow up.
Well, tennis hair tramo, that's on the maze, dewa, dela de dewa, say tramo thing, dewa.
Yeah. But if one is able to bring the winds into the central channel as then bring a forth that feeling of a bliss within the subtle mind and then realize Mahamudra, then this is a practice of Tantra Mahamudra.
Okay, that clarifies it. Thank you. And
is it okay? Thanks, Brian. No, thank you for your question. Okay. I see another hand. I think it's Laura.
Yes, that's me. Thank you so much again for the opportunity to ask questions. I have actually two very brief questions. I'm not sure if I understood correctly when Geshe was talking about Lama Tsongkhapa teachings when the calm abiding is achieved. I think Geshe was set on the level of the second, like the physical plancy. It's not the first one, the mental plancy. I'm not sure if I understood that correctly. And the second, it's if Geshe could explain if we take the mind itself as an object of meditation, how that will work, because technically the mind is empty and we do not have any physical object or meditation on breathing or anything like that. It's more advanced way how to actually achieve calm, abiding, meditating on the mind itself.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura. So for the first one, actually, I believe that what Geshe was saying is, I'm going to check this with him, but I'm just going to say it to you first. I believe that what Geshe was saying is that when one comes to that last level of the bliss of mental pliancy, in that instant that the bliss of mental pliancy is achieved, many commentators say that is the achievement of calm abiding, but Lama Tsongkhapa actually indicated that that is not the case, that it is a state of relaxation that unfolds shortly after that initial experience of the bliss of mental pliancy. But I'm going to check with him just to make sure I'm right with that.
Still in the first one, right? It's still within the mental plans. It's not in the second, in the physical.
No. So, yeah. So
that was my question. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so Laura, this is very confusing because there's actually 2 sets of 2 for a total of 4. So we have to be clear on this before we move on to the question. So the first one that you experience, so tambo semgi shejin dene lugi semgi shejong dene lugi shejong yeah lu shejong. So the first that we experience is mental pliancy, then we experience physical pliancy. The third one that we experience is the bliss of physical pliancy, not mental. The third one is the bliss of physical pliancy. The fourth one is the bliss of mental pliancy, right? So what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying is that when we get to that fourth one, that bliss of mental pliancy, not mental pliancy number 2, but number 4, the bliss of mental pliancy, some people say that that's calm abiding is achieved. Lama Tsongkhapa says no. Nanzo jipa di lebdu dene jerimbache Lama Tsongkhapa chena kandeslaw gare di shine mares roa di tets jela tets lolo chaya jela shine res. Yeah. So it's after that initial experience of the bliss of mental pliancy, then the bliss goes down a little bit and one has a more relaxed experience of it. That is when calm abiding is achieved, not in the initial instant.
Okay, thank you.
Hayang, yeah. Chaku. Yeah. Ale chukulwa dabuchi. Yeah. Yeah. Listen. So Geshe is giving an analogy to illustrate this. At that initial moment of the bliss of mental pliancy, the experience is a little bit intense, like boiling water, like if you're boiling water for tea. So what you want to do is turn it down so that you no longer have the water boiling, but it's still hot. It's at that moment that the calm abiding is achieved. So like when you see someone who's going through, who's like kind of like extremely happy in a really joyful state, the intensity of that joy can actually be a little bit unnerving because they seem kind of nervous, right? But once they kind of calm down and the happiness is still there, so it's a little bit like that. And so I'll get to your second question, Laura. Ane nipadi nganso shine kaplola rwa dene sem ginetsul gomja sona yapo yomares karinsena sem serie di yip yomares katok yomares zuk yomares chitsang yulmendra ginangla sem serie di gomyul nangla shine tobiatets kalikawares dimarebes. Yeah. So in terms of the second question about the suitability of the mind as your object of meditation for developing calm abiding, right? Because the mind is more ephemeral, it doesn't have color, shape, and so forth. So that not being suitable as an object to initially develop calm abiding. In fact, Geshe is explaining that this depends upon the individual practitioner. So, but one of the things that we do want to kind of determine when we're deciding, do I want to use the mind as an object for calm abiding meditation or not? You really want to think, am I mentally well? So another thing that we need to understand too is that when we're taking the mind as the object in calm abiding meditation, that means taking the mind as an object of single pointed focus. So when we're doing that with the mind, we are not taking one of the one of the 5 sense consciousnesses. That's not what we mean by mind in the context of the object of meditation here.
때 단기 졸라야 되레스 우싱한테 그때 보면 아이다 니 투복급이 갈 건서 배지면도 요아리 오칠래 용거 하라 반도 요 그때 뭐 말해.
So that wouldn't be suitable, right? Because those 5 sense consciousnesses, they're really unstable. So how do we cultivate stability on what's unstable? Because we know, for example, that when we go to sleep, the 5 sense consciousnesses are kind of in a dormant state. And then we wake up, they kind of suddenly come back on. So we can see that they're not stable objects to develop focus.
다요 세 참모 가서도 지켜지시기 요아라 대우 말했어.
And we also speak of sometimes the extremely subtle level of mind. So an interesting thing to note here is that that extremely subtle level of mind is also not the object of a focus when we speak about mind in the sense of calm abiding meditation.
단다 강가디나 당간으로 요 되게 때 쉬치고 요 되게 때 모선 로키죠. 딩걸 다 딩에서 때 모두.
We need that level of mind. nganso shepa trukpa dilabna jigirebe.
야 대사람들 그래.
So we need the mental consciousness, so not the 5 sense consciousnesses, the 6th consciousness, the mental consciousness at the coarse enough level that it's that mental consciousness that is present as a continuum, because the fact that it is a continuum, that it has a continuity, means that it is going to be a stable enough object for us to develop calm abiding.
그래서 대코 템보레라 다 대코면 다 오지세 뭐요.
So it has that particular type of mental consciousness that's like kind of on the more evident manifest level. It has enough stability and continuity for us to be able to take as an object of meditation for calm abiding.
야, 전에 오 같이 뭐 저러라야 되던 저한테 왔어. 기단기 좋아해서.
Los.
나도 유라 때는 윤을 때는 다 띵해서 템보잖아.
Yeah.
어데 오때 위에 가디나 공기 주자게 요아이자. 어느 템보 때지 임고요 말했어.
So for the same reason that Laura mentioned, there's actually a criticism of using breathing meditation as our main object of focus for developing calm abiding, because we know that at times the breathing is more subtle and at times it is more rough. So the breath might not have that kind of factor of stability that we're seeking in our object of meditation here.
배나 라도기지 알아.
Yeah.
저거 라초기서 같은 것만 가서 시에서 전에 저거 그거 잔에 띵에서 가서 들어가이나 만드네 이마 거러시고 또 맞을 게 저기가라 다 저러 미빠진다 봐 요하네라 라라 미빠전에 고자슈스.
Yeah. So it's also an object that we might want to pick an object that we're familiar with as our basis for developing calm abiding. So there's the story of the shepherd who, he was herding goats and sheep and things, and he was trying to develop calm abiding and he wasn't making any progress. So then he consulted a teacher who advised him to take the sheep or to take the goat as his object of focus, and in that way he was more easily able to develop concentration.
대가디라미 통되게 와이사 고마도 마서 침모요 와이사 전에 델라테네 리라고 건데가 로지디와스.
So the story goes that because this was an object that was intensely familiar to him due to his job as a shepherd, then it was very easy for him to hold the image of that herded animal within his mind. So next question. Okay, so for Steve, so I'll read it out. I can see it, Dave. Yeah, you can put. No, I don't want it to fall. Dave has a brand new computer. I don't want to be the one who breaks it. So, for all of us ordinary beings, is the realization of Sutra Mahamudra effectively the same as that of Tantric Mahamudra, and is the path of Sutra Mahamudra a complete path? Yeah, that's an interesting question. Nganso soso kyewo yena do gi chaja champo dang ngak gi chaja champo do chaja champo gi tokpa dang ngak chaja champo gi tokpa chikpa rebes di chua tamboche ane nipadi do gi chaja champo di lam yang par zopa chatsangwa yopa chikyang mepa mareski lam rebesa.
다 데로 말해 뭐다와 침보요. 응아가 샤자 침보이는 다 뒤에 할레빈디 바체가도 슈체가도 세 참모지로 왔어.
So we can say that the realization of Tantra Mahamudra and the path of Tantra Mahamudra are actually much more profound because the realization is achieved and the path is practiced on the basis of the subtle mind. So the object that we are trying to realize of Mahamudra is the same object, but the subject is different. The subject or the object possessor is different. Yeah. So because the subject or the object possessor in Tantra Mahamudra is the subtle mind, it's for that reason that we say it's more profound. So for those of us who practice Vajrayana, we understand that within the sutra teachings, right, it says that a complete realization of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, complete and perfect Buddhahood, is possible through the practice of sutra. But we understand that actually you can't really get to that final stage where you need to go based on sutra alone. You need to cultivate tantra. But for sure, we can reach the 10th bhumi, the 10th ground of a bodhisattva through the practices of sutra alone, right? So that's quite a high level. And so, for example, if you reach that 10th bhumi, that 10th ground of a bodhisattva through your practice of sutra, then like the Buddha, in one night, so between the night of realizing that 10th bhumi and the morning, if you enter tantra, you can realize Buddhahood very quickly. So there's that example as well. So one way of understanding the story of the final evening of the Buddha before enlightenment was that the Buddha, we could say, one way of saying it is that he was in single-pointed meditative equipoise upon Sutra Mahamudra. But as he was abiding single-pointedly upon the understanding of Sutra Mahamudra, he wasn't able to unfold that last little bit before getting to enlightenment. Based upon the blessings of the Buddhas, the previously enlightened beings, he was roused from his equipoise, entered the path of Tantra, and by that morning was enlightened. Right. So that unfolded, that realization unfolded in the course of one night, of course, because the Buddha had previously cultivated up to the 10th bhumi, the 10th ground, so already at a really high level. So Geshe will leave the answer to Steve's question there. And what was the other one, Dave? I think someone else put a question in, so. Oh no, I feel like I should be doing it. It might be easier. Oh, okay. So read the question. When doing shamatha meditation, if one makes a long pause, does one have to start all over again from zero in order to achieve the same level of concentration, or will it be easier through familiarization? Nganso di shinegi gom jabgen yina, rwa dene perna nganso negu denso nangla rwa, chik tobna rwa, dene nganso di tun sarna, dene tutsu ringpo gomma jabna, nganso ne tambone younger drogires, ne sumpa ginyamung di tempo chene jegires, and nganso younger tun dena dene ne sumne drotugires. Me ta tombo ni para je dela warwas patena kolmozolosun tandriyare. Suryongire ale. Siyungurwas. Ale ya. Ni makashi goma jamna suryongire. Tasba jawasane wasa tandamadares tempo yodomayo. So the answer to this question, Geshe is explaining, is a little bit more complicated. When we speak about the first and second of the 9 abidings, yes, once one achieves the first or second abiding, one can leave the meditation session, not meditate, for a while, and then go back and sit and kind of be at the same level. But from the 3rd level onward, actually each level is different. So that doesn't necessarily apply to all 9 of the abidings.
또 첨부 예매라 조디 디그라스.
And that's because as we come to those kind of higher of levels of the 9 abidings, it's really based upon our ability to completely address laxity and excitement, to have the antidotes to those. And yeah, so that
내도 모두 만라와 첨부 된 디가레스.
but that being said, even with those kind of subsequent abidings beyond the first and second, the more familiar one is through previous meditation, even if a long time goes by and one sits again, that familiarization is going to make it a lot easier for you than someone newly coming to that level. All right. Oh yeah, from Douglas. Okay. So once calm abiding is achieved, can the state... Oh, but this is what didn't we cover this kind of? So Douglas, can you write in the comments if you want this answered again? Because I'm thinking it looks a bit similar, but maybe there's a nuance. Do you want me to ask it again? I will, of course. I'm here at your service. Okay, so thank you, Douglas. So once it is fully achieved, so I think you mean once you reach the 9th abiding, is that always there? Yes, I'm happy to ask that. Ne gupa, yeah, thank you. Sorry, thanks for your clarification. Ne gupa di lebdu, ne gupa tobdu kaduyine yoris, nanso ne gupa parshane dene tuzurimpo goma jamna dene younger dene ne gupa data lebtu giribis.
Ne gubader.
Ne gupa di. Oh,
ne gubader.
yeah.
Tor.
Yes. So yeah, that's there continuously. So you can sit back down and that will still be there. And then I think we had a... Yeah, because you've reached... Yeah. So in that lifetime, so Geshe is qualifying, in that lifetime, that high level of single pointed concentration, that will continuously abide, right? There's always caveats. That's why it's so great to have a Geshe, because they know all these caveats. So the caveat is in that lifetime. Okay, so Carol, go ahead.
Ashidele Geshe-la. I would like to... Hi. I would like to ask, when the winds spontaneously enter the center channel, that means the Tantra Mahamudra can be achieved spontaneously?
Not so...
Let's say if one... sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, no, let me ask the first part, Carolyn. Sorry, I didn't realize you had a second part, but let me ask that first part anyway, and then we'll come to the second part. Non so kandes laukore so lungden so sa uma martim dirwa dene lenkye timiaginetsu chikyore ngaki nangora lenkye timiaginetsu di nyongna dene so ngaki chakshen tokpa ratsab rebes labtugi rebesa. So it's actually, we can't say that one has realized the Tantra Mahamudra at that point, because yes, the winds abide and the bliss is brought forth, but one still needs to look at whether one was able to abide single-pointedly on emptiness. That has to be taken into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. But if one has, from that absorption of the winds, accessed the extremely subtle mind, and on that basis had that realization of emptiness, then yes, you've realized Tantra Mahamudra. Samchamo pipe?
Pipe.
Ale.
Yeah.
Ale, semchamo.
Se the Krichi Paiji, Paizo Delta Paija Motagra.
Ale,
Zajandarjanga, the Nijini.
Yeah, the upper Kumasong.
I said some of the dead was New York was.
Yep.
That's all day.
Yep.
That's a Kanga Yanda Kanga, Paino Del to the others.
Pipe mount, pipe so de la tene pipe gendag mambo.
Momoyar, watching some Momoyar Pandos and Dizzy.
Then is some trouble correct.
Kanga, Tate Kanga to Padagara was.
So so to access the subtle mind, when we talk about absorbing those winds, it's like we have that pipe, which is like the central channel. So that means all of the winds from all of the other elaborate pipes that have connected to that, they've dissolved into the central one.
What did you do? That there is a Tamogu to Manito, so not Tango to Bashiana Manachiro.
ngak chagjingi toba.
Yeah.
So when one has used the subtle mind to realize emptiness, then one can say one has realized Tantra Mahamudra. Did you have something else, Carolyn?
Okay, now my question is, that means we have to do conjoined meditation, calm, abiding, and special insight, because we have to meditate on emptiness, right?
Dene nganso shine laktong niga gogire duas Korean sena sem tramo di levne nganso mutine tompani la gomjab gogire duas di levela.
다 이도 전에 집보가 저거 말해. 하도 집보가 저거 말해서 다 지하 전에도 하도 니가 순대.
Correct. So shamatha by itself is not enough. Vipassana or special insight is not enough in and of itself. We need both calm abiding, the shamatha, and the vipassana, the special insight.
Thank you very much, Geshe-la.
Thanks for your
translator.
question. No worries. I'm glad we got you an answer. Have we covered everyone? Oh, sorry. Yeah, Manoshi, go ahead.
Fair to say that the journey of Sutra Tantra Mahamudra is much takes a lot more time than the Tantric consciousness, because you're using different levels of mind and energy.
Did everyone hear Manoshi's question at home? She has quite a so no, it's okay. No, I can say your question again. I remember it. No. So I'm just going to read your question again, if you don't mind. So Manoshi's asking about the journey, right? The duration of the path of Sutra Mahamudra and Tantra Mahamudra. Is the duration of that path of Sutra Mahamudra much longer than the duration or the path of Tantra Mahamudra because of these different levels of subtlety of the mind that you're using, right? Nanso the do gi chaja champo gi lam nga gi chaja chambo gilam le pet ringa res Korean sena nganso sem rapodang tramo gi kebarchi res dilabna digirebe.
Yeah.
Tuja ringa goes. Yes, absolutely. So that's correct. Yeah.
너 이까라기는 또 많이 내서 또 잡아지.
Yeah.
다세 참모사 팔레에서는 연조요 보게 좀 받친 좋고요.
So actually, if we reach the direct realization of emptiness using sutra, before we have accessed the subtle mind using tantra, semtramo yangar toni ngosu togo. Yeah. We actually need to again realize emptiness directly using the subtle mind. So I hope you don't mind if I ask a follow-up, Manoshi. I'm going to ask, if that's the case, does the previous direct realization of emptiness according to sutra make it easier to realize the emptiness with the subtle mind according to tantra? Nganso ngoma dolukla ngosu topa di latene nganso sem tramo lebdu deni ngosu topa tes lelawa sogiribes.
다 릴라와도 그 거로 차와 있어 때 릴라와라 왔어. 이나 영에서도 마도 윙이야라. 엄마 사바도바 우리 윤주지 세 잘못되지도.
So Geshe said it's easier, yes, from the point of view of the object, which is emptiness, because you've realized that. However, one does need to go through a process of, again, activating the subtle mind and using that to meditate single-pointedly and realize emptiness, even still. So in this context, it's useful to recollect when we talk about the example clear light, the peuse, and the meaning clear light, the döse. Yeah. Dave.
Supplemental. Is that because the object of negation differs?
Gagja mandrawa yoribesa.
Gagja mandrawa yomare.
No.
Gagja chipa yokoro ga tumani ta tara manduas. Ta ina iche koro tisamele.
So the object of negation doesn't differ. And in fact, the object of emptiness, we can't say one is more profound or subtle. The difference here is really solely with the yulchen, the object possessor or the subject. So we need to cultivate familiarity with the object of emptiness using the subtle mind, just as we cultivated that familiarity using the coarser mind. So that's why we need to do that again. But we don't need to wait a long time as we had to do with sutra. So we just, just to clarify that. Yeah. So like we've understood the object of negation. We have all of that process that's still there. So it's going to be a lot easier. So I think Abhilash, and then I think Brian has another one. So we'll start with Abhilash and then we'll come to Brian again.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me properly?
I can, yeah. Yep.
Thank you, Geshe and Geshe.
Geshe is teasing you and saying you weren't able to get here in time, so no question. He's just kidding. He's just kidding.
Okay, I'll come.
He's just giving you a hard time. Don't take it seriously. Go ahead.
Okay. So the first question is, how is the Mahamudra presentation of meditating on the nature of mind different from developing the special insight based on the instructions of the 4 foundations of mindfulness?
Yeah,
interesting. I find that it's very similar in approach.
So just to make sure I got your question correct, Abhilash, because I'm hearing you kind of faintly, but I think I got it. So you want to ask if there's a difference in the, sorry, can you say it again? I think I missed it.
Yes, whether there's a difference or, so how is the Mahamudra presentation meditating on the nature of the mind?
Yeah.
Right? How is this different from the instructions on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, especially the mindfulness of the mind?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yes. Okay. I got you. No. That's good. That's good. This is an interesting question, actually. Nganso, chaja chempo la tene, nganso di sem gi ngoho dapochik gomjab gi yeres roa. Nganso chaja chempo nangola dogi chaja chempo nangola sem gi ngo gomjab ya dang jempa nierji gi nangola sem gi jempa nierji kepar kandeschik resa. Good point, Geshe said. So good point.
Yeah, that dembore. That's hey koro kuzu ta
So if we just look at Sutra Mahamudra here, actually we can say that the close placement of mindfulness on the mind and cultivating an understanding of the nature of the mind on using Sutra Mahamudra, when it's at the level of the relative, they're actually very similar. Yeah. And in fact, the niga setup together. And actually, in terms of the preliminaries that are mentioned in the Mahamudra teachings, like visualizing the field of accumulation and then dissolving it into oneself to receive the blessings of the 3 jewels as the preliminaries, you could do that whether you're meditating on Sutra Mahamudra or close placement of mindfulness on the mind. So that would be there in both cases. So we could say that the nature of the kunzop gingo, chage chembo kunzop gingo ra mare donna gingo. And we could also say that they're similar because we can talk about cultivating the close placement of mindfulness of the mind on the relative nature of the mind and on the ultimate nature of the mind, just as we can meditate on the relative nature of the mind and the ultimate nature of the mind in the Mahamudra. So the stages of how the path is cultivated differs a little bit in terms of the sets of instructions of Mahamudra and the 4 close placements of mindfulness. But actually, when you are cultivating them, they are very similar. Geshe is just commenting that the major difference would be when we come to the point of view of Sutra and Tantra. That's where there's the major difference. Yeah, so he said you make a good point. Did that answer your question, Abhilash?
Yes, it did.
Okay, great.
Can I ask a second question?
Of course.
The second question is, how do we infuse, great compassion
compassion, right, or bodhisattva with the meditation on the nature of the mind, or is it just in the beginning, and is it as a result of the meditation on the nature of the
Did you
mind?
hear that, Dave? I didn't hear what he said. It was
We
really
can't.
you were so
Is it-
your sound was so faint, Abhilash. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Okay,
Can we
I'll
turn
try
up the
to
volume?
speak. I'll speak a little louder.
Yeah, sorry.
So, how do we infuse, great compassion or bodhisattva, right, or with the meditation on the nature of the mind?
Yeah.
Okay, or is it, or is this a result of the meditation on the nature of the mind? Because as we are meditating on the nature of the mind, at that point, I don't see, an emphasis on bodhicitta, right? It's in the beginning, right? Before we start the meditation.
As a
right?
preliminary, yeah. Okay,
The
I think I got
preliminary.
your question.
Yeah.
Dene nganso perna nganso ningje simpe gi tompani chik gogire duas roa nganso jampa ningje
니지 선비 뚱바니 맞 니지 선비 돈이 또 비셔.
Tony to Bishop, sorry. Nije simbe Tony to Bishop dang dinso yeres. Yine nganso semgi ngo gomja bekapala, chagshengi nanglola ya. Dene nganso kandesla kore, chagshengi gom ningje dang jampa kandes singores. Jangchu gisem kandes singores. Karin sena tsik katu tananganso semgi ngo chikpo tagores. Dene kande singures. Di ngonjo, nganso ngonjo kapala jangshu gisem yotsang dela tenetet singires kande strogres.
다 대도로 와서 ngwa to 지발해서 로도.
Yeah.
그거 ngwa 깔이나 nganzo 하고서 와.
Yeah.
니지 뭐라와 니 뭐고 근데 왔어. 현재 요즘 같은 게 내서 때 맛이 병원게라. 고알 코든데 니제 좀비 돈이 니지고 쇼바고 tane shoji go 근데 왔어.
So actually it's the same as in Tantra in that, yes, so we cultivate it as a preliminary in our practice, and specifically the angle with which we meditate on compassion, we can think that it is due to unknowingness and lack of realization that beings continuously circle within samsara. And so for that reason, then one develops a compassion for them.
내가 년도에 걸로니까 그래. 저자지만 뭐시비 온게 고알 코든데 당에 때 리바시네 다 강갈 뱀부터 대시도이.
So you could think in the context of the Mahamudra specifically, it is due to the lack of understanding realization of Mahamudra that sentient beings continue to suffer, continue to circle within samsara, within a cyclic existence. How pitiful is it? May I free them from that lack of knowingness. But you are absolutely right. It really is cultivated in the context of the preliminaries.
디세 텔 코로레 마도 투디야 좀바도 니절 수도 자요 말했잖아.
Yeah, but when you're actually meditating on the nature of the mind, Abhilash, you're correct in that at that moment, that's what you're focused on. You're not like kind of trying to bring love and compassion in through a back door or something.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Geshe. Thank you, Vijay.
Yeah, no, you're welcome, Abhilash. You're welcome. It was a good question. I think, Brian, did you have something else?
Yeah, just one more question, and it's kind of a follow-up to what you were just talking about. You said you could meditate on relative nature of mind and ultimate nature of mind as objects, but the ultimate nature of mind is the object for Mahamudra Shamatha, correct?
So, nganso kunzop gisem tang dundam gisem niga gomjab tu gire semgi ngo kola gomjab tu yine chirtang nganso so you're asking for calm abiding, or your special insight in Mahamudra, Brian? You want to make sure it's the ultimate nature of the mind that you're meditating on to develop calm abiding in Mahamudra. Was that your question? Sorry.
Yeah, is that the object or is it the relative nature of mind?
Okay. Nganso chaja chempo shine drupsu kapololaya. Nganso gomja kunzop gisem res dundam gisem res.
네. 신데드비 카토래.
Yeah, chaja chempo hi lukla.
사자 쳔버 신데드비 카토 샤자 쳔버 신데드비 카토로도 또 많이 돼. 로그라왔어.
Tombani. Dene dundam Yeah. So the object of meditation, right, on one level, within calm abiding, according to the system of Mahamudra, would be emptiness. So taking that into account, we would have to say that yes, it's the ultimate nature of the mind. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that it is not possible to cultivate calm abiding using the relative nature of the mind, because it certainly is. Yeah.
And then a follow-up. So when I think yesterday you were talking about when we recognize that the projections that we're experiencing, I didn't really quite catch it because it was quick, but it was something about the projections that we're experiencing is the relative nature of the mind once we kind of understand that all things are dependent on mind to exist. And so this is how we start to recognize the relative nature of the mind, and then through that we can understand the ultimate nature of the mind. Is this correct? And can Geshe kind of elaborate on this point?
Nganso namtok dinso ngosinya dene namtok ngosinya gi nupa la tene nganso kunsop gi sem di tenchung chik res hako gi res dene kunsop gi sem di namtok dela tene namtok yongi res di hakoela tene tenjung hakoela tene dene dela tene nganso dundam sem dundam gi ngochik hako gi res di labna di gi res. Yes, so that's correct, Brian. What you said is correct. Tambo nganso, I just want to say it back to Geshe one more time. Tambo nganso namto dinso ngosinya la tene nganso kunzop gi sem so when we can recognize the nature of the relative mind on the basis of dependent arising, understanding how those namtok, how those mental projections or thoughts are coming. Yes. And then on the basis of understanding the nature of the relative mind, we can then understand the nature of the ultimate mind. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But when one has achieved stability in Mahamudra practice and one is doing Mahamudra meditation single-pointedly on the ultimate nature of the mind, the relative is not coming there because that's being cultivated single-pointedly.
Yeah, and so this kind of explains that they are two different objects in the sense that there's no way to meditate on ultimate nature and relative nature at the same time. And I guess this is kind of the unique quality of a Buddha, correct?
Yeah, except for a Buddha. You're absolutely right. Yep, it's only a Buddha that can do that. Nganso kunzo dang dundam dinso niga drotu gyomares karinsena sangye matok roa dundam dang kunzo yul chikla. Yeah. Yes. And Geshe just giving the caveat that to be able to perceive the relative and the ultimate of the object clearly, just like the flowers in front of him. But within Tantra, we do speak about being able to, in one moment, accumulate both the collections of merit and wisdom. So that's another angle to consider. Yeah. So to consider the difference in Sutra and Tantra. So I think I'll take one more question, whoever's next, and not to disappoint people. But just because I do want to leave an hour so that folks can have time to get their lunch before Dave's session. So I'll take one more question.
May I ask, what is relative nature when you meditate on the relative nature of the mind?
Nganso kunzop gi ngodi, sem kunzop gi ngodi di kareresa. It's the characteristics of the mind, recognizing the characteristics of the mind.
Nipa Kariyum, Nipasana.
Yeah, recognizing the characters, the potentials, things like that.
Yes, Chamotedo Maretini, Hakosara,
Mm.
yes, Tata Kachimbukashi was.
Yeah, so it's not the subtle natures of the mind, but more manifest.
You know, Matil Shishikari, Sangatolo, Matil, Tenda,
So if you ask what are the characteristics of that person, you'll be able to say something about their qualities and their attributes and so forth. So it's that kind of recognition.
this one.
Yeah, I thought there was another person who actually came before Carolyn, but I guess there wasn't. Yeah. So Geshe said we should stop here. Yeah, so that we have enough time for lunch before the next session. So I'm sorry. I feel like I didn't get to everybody's questions. So my apologies, but thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Bravo.
Thanks. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Geshe.
Geshe.
Yeah, Dele, Canada Dele, this is so.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Take care, everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Is it closed now? Can you get up?
It's not booked.
Oh.
It's the same one? Same.
It's good. Escuchamos.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Take care.
This is what? Oh, yeah.
Jason.
Oh, yeah.